My name is Lyra Mercer, and tonight, I am going to make a dead man smile from his grave. The crystal chandelier above the grand ballroom of the Sterling estate shattered the light into 10,000 glittering needles, each one pricking at the back of my neck like a warning. Below, 300 of the city's most influential elites sipped vintage champagne, their laughter melodic, shallow, and sickeningly loud. At the center of it all stood Marcus Sterling. He was 62 years old, clad in a tailored velvet tuxedo, his white hair parted with surgical precision, his eyes bright with the triumph of a man who believed he had conquered mortality itself. 10 years ago, on a night as freezing as this one, my father hanged himself in a 6x8 prison cell. He was an honest man, an engineer who built bridges that connected lives, until Marcus Sterling decided he wanted my father's company. Marcus didn't just buy it, he framed my father for a structural failure that claimed 12 lives, tore our name through the mud, bankrupted our estate, and watched from his high tower as my family collapsed under the weight of orchestrated shame. My mother took to her bed and never woke up. I was left with a name that sounded like a curse and a heart that turned into a piece of flint. Now, I was standing 20 feet away from Marcus Sterling, holding a glass of sparkling water, wearing a silk emerald gown that hid the small silver USB drive stitched into my corset. My identity had been thoroughly erased and meticulously rebuilt. To the world, I was Dr. Vesper Cole, an international tech consultant hired to oversee the cybersecurity for Sterling Enterprises' multi-billion-dollar public merger tonight. "You look distant, Dr. Cole," a smooth, cultured voice spoke beside me. I turned slowly, fixing a practiced, confident smile on my face. It was Julian Sterling, Marcus's 32-year-old son and heir apparent. Unlike his boisterous father, Julian was quiet, observant, and possessed eyes that seemed constantly engaged in a game of chess no one else could see. "Just taking it all in, Mr. Sterling," I replied, keeping my voice silky and soft. "It's not every day one witnesses the creation of an empire." "Empires aren't created, Vesper," Julian said, taking a slow sip from his glass, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my heart hammer against my ribs. "They are stolen. Piece by piece, until the original owner realizes they are standing on thin air." A jolt of cold adrenaline shot through my veins. Did he know? Was that a subtle warning, or merely the arrogance of a man born into blood money? "A cynical perspective for a man inheriting the throne," I said softly. "Or perhaps just an honest one," Julian murmured. "Keep your eyes on my father tonight, Dr. Cole. Great men always fall at the height of their vanity. It's the law of gravity." Before I could process his words, Marcus Sterling stepped up to the mahogany podium at the front of the ballroom. The room fell into an expectant, reverent silence. Microphones hummed. "Friends, partners, visionaries," Marcus began, his voice booming with artificial warmth. "Tonight, we do not merely celebrate 30 years of Sterling Enterprise. Tonight, we finalize the merger that will give us control over the entire Eastern Transit grid." The crowd erupted into applause. I felt my hand slip toward my waist, my fingers brushing the hidden seam of my dress where the USB drive lay waiting. In less than 5 minutes, the master display screen behind Marcus was scheduled to run a promotional video. Instead, once I plugged the drive into the master server backstage, it would broadcast court transcripts, forged bank logs, and audio recordings proving that Marcus himself had ordered the sabotage of the Mill Creek Bridge 10 years ago. It was absolute, undeniable ruin. I backed away from the crowd, stepping into the shadowy corridor that led toward the private server room. The air grew cooler here, smelling of old leather, polished marble, and rich cigars. My boots made no sound against the thick Persian runner. I reached the reinforced steel door of the server room. I pulled out my stolen keycard, swiped it, and watched the electronic lock turn from red to green with a soft, satisfying click. I pushed the door open, stepped inside, and felt a cold hand wrap violently around my wrist. A heavy grip pulled me into the dim room, and the door slammed shut behind me, locking automatically. The lights flickered on, revealing 2 imposing men in tactical suits standing on either side of the doorway. And standing beside the central server rack, arms crossed over his chest, was Julian Sterling. My heart slammed against my chest like a trapped bird. Suspense quelled around my throat, suffocating and sharp. "Looking for the master terminal, Lyra?" Julian asked quietly. Hearing my real name spoken aloud after 10 years felt like a physical blow. I stumbled back an inch, my brain racing through contingency plans that suddenly felt paper-thin. "How long?" I whispered, my voice trembling despite my desperate attempts to hold it steady. "Since you applied for the security contract 4 months ago," Julian said, walking toward me slowly, his footsteps echoing in the sterile room. "You thought you were a ghost, Lyra. But my father keeps files on every survivor of the men he's destroyed. He waited for you to come. He let you get this close just to watch the hope extinguish in your eyes." Tears of rage burned behind my eyelids. "He killed my father. He ruined innocent lives." "I know," Julian said flatly. "And that is why you are going to give me that flash drive." "Never," I spat, reaching into my corset to pull the drive, ready to crush it under my heel before letting them have it. "You don't understand," Julian said, taking another step forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper as he glanced toward the security cameras above us. "He's watching us right now on the private feed in his office. He thinks this is his trap. He thinks I'm about to turn you over to the federal authorities for corporate espionage." Julian reached into his jacket pocket. The guards didn't move. He pulled out an identical silver USB drive and held it up between his fingers. "He built an empire on blood," Julian whispered, his eyes flashing with a dark, terrifying intensity. "You want to ruin his company, Lyra. But I want to destroy his soul. Hand me your drive, take mine, and walk back out to the ballroom." "Why would I trust you?" I demanded, breathless, trapped between two monsters. "You're his son." "I am the son of the woman he poisoned when I was 12 years old to inherit her estate," Julian hissed, his jaw clenching tightly. "You want revenge for a father, Lyra. I want revenge for a lifetime." The air inside the server room felt thick enough to choke on. I stood frozen, my thumb pressed against the sharp edge of the flash drive in my hand, looking into the eyes of Marcus Sterling's heir. I searched his face for a flicker of deceit, a trace of his father's cruel vanity. Instead, I saw a hollow, endless abyss of hatred that mirrored my own. "Swapping the drives takes 5 seconds, I said, my voice barely audible over the hum of the cooling fans. "What is on yours?" "Everything you have, plus the medical files he suppressed, the offshore accounts he used to pay off the coroner, and a self-executing warrant that alerts the Department of Justice the moment the stream begins," Julian replied quietly. "If you do this your way, his lawyers will tie you up in court for 20 years until you die broke or disappear. If we do this my way, he leaves this building in handcuffs tonight." I looked at the guard near the door. He didn't flinch. These weren't Marcus's men, they were Julian's. "If this is a trap, Julian," I said, stepping forward until we were inches apart, "I will make sure you burn in the same fire." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he murmured. We exchanged the drives. The metal felt ice-cold in my hand. I turned to the central terminal, inserted Julian's drive into the master port, and typed in the override command I had spent 6 months preparing. The screen flashed blue, and a timer appeared on the console, 00:03:00. 3 minutes until automated broadcast across every monitor in the estate and every news syndicate hooked into the event's live feed. "Now leave," Julian ordered, stepping back toward his guards. "Go back to the ballroom. Stand where he can see you. Let him think he's won until the moment his world collapses." I didn't wait. I pushed through the heavy steel doors and walked back into the brightly lit corridor. My legs felt unnaturally heavy, every step a conscious effort of willpower. Suspense rattled through my chest with the steady rhythm of a clock ticking down to 0. Was Julian telling the truth? Or had I just handed the key to my father's ultimate erasure over to the son of his killer? I re-entered the ballroom. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and roast meats. Marcus Sterling was still at the podium, basking in the applause of the crowd as he finished his introductory speech. And now, Marcus's voice thundered through the sound system, I invite you all to look at the main screens as we present the future of Sterling Enterprise. The lights dimmed. The crowd turned toward the massive 300-inch LED screen behind the stage. My heart stopped. The screen flickered. A high-pitched squeal echoed through the speakers. But instead of financial documents, medical files, or bank ledgers, the screen illuminated with a crisp, high-definition video feed of a dark room. In the center of the video feed was a chair. Bound to the chair, gagged and bleeding from a gash on her forehead, was an older woman with silver hair and familiar, terrified eyes. My breath caught in my throat. The room spun around me. It was my mother. My mother, who I believed had died 10 years ago in her sleep after a heartbreak-induced stroke. My mother, whose grave I had visited every year on the anniversary of my father's death. A collective gasp rippled through the ballroom. The guests looked at the screen in horror, assuming it was a macabre artistic presentation or a technical glitch. Marcus Sterling stood at the podium, his smile vanishing, replaced by a sudden, terrifying coldness. He slowly raised his eyes from the crowd and locked them directly onto mine. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look panicked. He looked amused. He lifted a small black device from his jacket, clicked a button, and the audio from the video feed clicked on. Lyra. A weak, rasping voice whimpered from the speakers. Lyra, don't. Did you really think I didn't know who you were, little girl? Marcus's voice echoed through his lapel microphone, sounding like dry leaves rustling over a tombstone. The entire ballroom went dead silent. No one moved. The guests sat frozen, paralyzed by the sudden descent into madness. Marcus stepped away from the podium and walked slowly to the edge of the stage, looking down at me as if I were an insect beneath his polished shoe. 10 years ago, your father took something far more valuable from me than a company, Marcus said, his tone casual, almost conversational. He took my wife. He had an affair with her, Lyra. Julian isn't my son. He is your half-brother. The ground seemed to give way beneath my feet. I staggered back against a glass table, sending champagne flutes crashing to the marble floor. The sound shattered the silence, but no one cared. My mother. I choked out, tears finally breaking through my composure, streaming down my hot cheeks. She's alive? She has been alive in a private facility in Geneva for a decade, Marcus chuckled softly. A very comfortable, very isolated facility. I kept her as an insurance policy. I knew one day, either you or Julian would come for me. I waited for you both to coalesce. I waited for you to combine your pathetic little plots so I could crush you both in a single evening. He pointed toward the balcony above the ballroom. Standing there, flanked by 4 armed security officers, was Julian. His hands were bound behind his back with steel zip ties. He looked down at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, gut-wrenching agony. Julian tried to play the long game, Marcus said, turning back to the screen showing my mother. He thought he was clever, collecting files, corrupting my servers. But every move he made was guided by me. And now, Lyra, you stand here. You brought the spark, but I own the powder keg. Marcus raised a silver remote control. With one click, the facility in Geneva is cleared. Permanently. And you will both spend the rest of your lives in a federal penitentiary for attempting to murder my family and sabotage a national security grid. Suspense tightened like a noose around my neck. My mind reeled. 10 years of hatred, 10 years of training, planning, isolating myself from the world, all built on a foundation of lies engineered by the monster standing on the stage. My mother was alive. My brother was standing above me in chains. And the man who stole our lives held the detonator to our total destruction. You're a demon, I breathed, my voice carrying across the silent, terrified ballroom. I am a businessman, Marcus corrected, his thumb resting lightly on the red button of the remote. And in business, leverage is everything. Look around you, Lyra. These people don't care about justice. They care about power. And power belongs to me. He raised his thumb, preparing to press the button. Say goodbye to your mother, Lyra. Wait! I screamed, stepping forward, raising both hands into the air. Wait! Please! I'll give you what you want. Marcus paused, a smirk playing on his lips. You have nothing I want. I do, I gasped, tears falling freely now, my voice breaking in a display of total, shattered defeat. The drive Julian gave me. I didn't just upload it to the master server. I put a secondary worm into the system. If you kill her, or if you press that button, the worm will detonate a wipe sequence across every offshore server you own. Every account in the Caymans, every shell company in Panama, every cryptographically sealed vault. You will be powerful, Marcus, but you will be completely, utterly penniless. Marcus's smirk wavered. For the first time tonight, a flicker of doubt crossed his dark eyes. He looked at the server display screen, which was now flashing an amber warning prompt, critical override, authorization required to prevent purge. You're lying, Marcus snarled. Try me, I sobbed, taking another step toward the stage, looking small, broken, and helpless. Press the button. Kill my mother. Arrest Julian. But watch $3 billion evaporate into digital dust before security can even reach me. You're a demon, I breathed, my voice carrying across the silent, terrified ballroom. I am a businessman, Marcus corrected, his thumb resting lightly on the red button of the remote. And in business, leverage is everything. Look around you, Lyra. These people don't care about justice. They care about power. And power belongs to me. He raised his thumb, preparing to press the button. Say goodbye to your mother, Lyra. Wait! I screamed, stepping forward, raising both hands into the air. Wait! Please! I'll give you what you want. Marcus paused, a smirk playing on his lips. You have nothing I want. I do, I gasped, tears falling freely now, my voice breaking in a display of total, shattered defeat. The drive Julian gave me. I didn't just upload it to the master server. I put a secondary worm into the system. If you kill her, or if you press that button, the worm will detonate a wipe sequence across every offshore server you own. Every account in the Caymans, every shell company in Panama, every cryptographically sealed vault. You will be powerful, Marcus, but you will be completely, utterly penniless. Marcus's smirk wavered. For the first time tonight, a flicker of doubt crossed his dark eyes. He looked at the server display screen, which was now flashing an amber warning prompt, critical override, authorization required to prevent purge. You're lying, Marcus snarled. Try me, I sobbed, taking another step toward the stage, looking small, broken, and helpless. Press the button. Kill my mother. Arrest Julian. But watch $3 billion evaporate into digital dust before security can even reach me. Marcus swallowed hard. His fingers twitched on the remote. The vanity that had sustained him for 60 years was suddenly warring with his absolute terror of poverty. He couldn't risk it. Money wasn't just his wealth, it was his identity, his weapon, his armor. Give me the override code, Marcus demanded, stepping down from the stage, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper as he approached me. Give me the code, and I will let your mother live. I will send her to you tonight. Promise me, I wept, dropping to my knees on the marble floor before him, looking up into his cruel face with wide, pleading eyes. Promise me you won't hurt her. Marcus stood directly over me, looking down with supreme, intoxicating satisfaction. He had broken me. He had brought the daughter of his arch-rival to her knees, begging for mercy in front of the entire world. I promise, Marcus lied smoothly, leaning down closer, whispering so only I could hear. Now give me the code, you pathetic little rat. I leaned up toward his ear, as if to whisper the secret that would save my life. And then, I smiled. The sorrow melted from my face in a fraction of a second, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp calm that made Marcus freeze in place. The code, I whispered softly into his ear, is Milkreek. Before he could react, I reached into the hidden fold of my sleeve and pulled out a small, pressurized aerosol cylinder, not a drive, not a device, but a medical-grade fast-acting paralytic agent I had acquired 6 months ago. I pressed the nozzle directly against the side of his exposed neck and discharged it. Marcus gasped, staggering back. He dropped the remote control. It clattered onto the marble floor and skidded across the smooth tile. What did you? Marcus stammered, his words instantly slurring as the compound attacked his central nervous system. His knees buckled, and he collapsed heavily onto the floor right beside me, completely unable to move his arms or legs, though his eyes remained wide open, filled with sudden, agonizing panic. I stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles of my green silk dress. I picked up the fallen remote from the floor. "Did you really think I didn't know about my mother, Marcus?" I asked, my voice echoing clearly through the ballroom microphone I had unclipped from his lapel. The entire crowd stared in stunned silence. 3 weeks ago, I said, looking down at the paralyzed billionaire, Julian, and I extracted my mother from your facility in Geneva. The video playing on that screen isn't a live feed. It was recorded 6 days ago in a safe house in Maine. She is safe. She has been safe for almost a month. Marcus's eyes widened in horror, but he couldn't speak, couldn't scream, couldn't move a single muscle. On the balcony above, Julian casually slipped his hands out of the zip ties, which had never been secured, and smiled down at his father. The guards surrounding him stepped back and bowed their heads respectfully. They had belonged to Julian all along. "You thought you were playing chess with children, Marcus," I continued, kneeling beside him so he could see my face clearly. "You thought vanity made you invincible. You built a life on secrets, lies, and leverage. But you forgot one simple rule of nature." I leaned in close, my breath warm against his frozen, terrified face. "When you tear a family apart, you don't destroy them. You just give them a common enemy." Julian stepped down the grand staircase, joining me beside his father. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen once. The massive LED screen behind the stage changed instantly. The video of my mother vanished. In its place, millions of financial documents, wiretap recordings, and signed confession logs began streaming live across the screen, and simultaneously broadcasting to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, every news network in the nation, and the SEC. Sirens began to wail in the distance, their high-pitched screams cutting through the night air, drawing closer and closer to the gates of the Sterling estate. "The paralytic will wear off in about 20 minutes, Marcus," Julian said quietly, looking down at the man who had tormented his life. "Just in time for you to feel the weight of the handcuffs on your wrists. You will spend the rest of your natural life in a cage, watching us rebuild everything you stole, under the name you tried to erase." I looked down at Marcus Sterling one last time. His eyes were watering, filled with the helpless, suffocating terror of a man who had lost his empire, his freedom, and his pride in a single, devastating stroke. I turned my back on him, took my brother's arm, and together, we walked out of the ballroom into the cold, clean night air, ready to finally take our first real breath.